Hi book lovers, my name is Christina and welcome back to Cozy Novel Niche. Today I'm here with one more review, and this is a book that I've read during the winter months, and I just decided to film the review for it because I needed some time to figure out my thoughts about it. But then I kind of decided not to film the video, and then on a whim again I decided to film it, so now I have zero thoughts put together, but I will just go with the flow and tell you what I think about this book now that a little bit of time has passed and my head is a little bit clearer. And I'm talking about Cacophony of Bone. This book has the physical object, has a long story with me. If you know, this is one of the books that got lost on my trip from Ireland. I bought it in Ireland, then unfortunately my bag was stolen, and afterwards I rebought this book. So this still makes me think about Ireland, but it's not the physical object that I brought from Ireland, but it still has a meaning. I mean, I still think about that trip when I just keep this book near to me. And this is a book that I got just because it was recommended on a shelf in a bookshop. So I just went with it on a whim. I wanted something from an Irish author. And this is apparently the second book from the author. The first one was very successful. It was called Thin Places. And this one is the second book that's written as a second book, because during this book we actually can see the author editing the first book. So you can definitely see the behind the scenes of the creation of the first book if you read that one and not this one yet. For me, this was the first approach with the author. I've never read anything by her, and this was a different book for a lot of reasons. First of all, it covers a whole year from a winter solstice in 2019 to the winter solstice in 2020, which means that we're covering exactly the beginning of the pandemic and then the first part of its duration. So it's a very unique moment in time, as we all well know. Plus, this author just spent that period of time in a small cottage in Ireland, so it's even more unique. And from here we can already say that this book will not resonate with a lot of us, because if you've lived during the pandemic in the city, in a small apartment, anywhere else where it was just crammed with no garden, no outside space, you will probably be rubbed the wrong way by this book. And I was a little bit, actually. I tried my best to separate my experience and the experience of a lot of people that I know from the experience of the author, because it is still valid and authentic, of course. But if you lived a very different experience, it could be just a little bit, I don't know, fastidious, a little bit kind of... I don't even know how to describe it exactly, but let's get to it so that you will understand the feeling. So, of course, the pandemic started and the author just ended up being locked in the space of a small cottage with the terrain around it, just the ground that surrounds it. And at the beginning of the pandemic, she had a little bit more of freedom, so she was able to swim in lakes and rivers, and afterwards the space became just smaller and smaller, so she was just able to walk with the dog around her house for like 2 kilometers. And this already is so much more than a lot of people were able to do. So that's the reason why I'm telling you this could be an experience that's very divisive. And so of course she's suffering from it, but if your experience was even worse, then you will just perceive her approach, like her reaction to the situation, as a little bit of an entitled situation, I guess. But this was not the purpose of the book, because the author is not writing the book in order to tell us her experience during the pandemic. She actually starts this book from the beginning of the book is when she moves to this little cottage, because she moves away from the city, from Derry, if I remember correctly, because she needed to process a lot of grief and a lot of difficult inner turmoils and emotions. So that's the journey that she was trying to describe during this book, but the pandemic happened, and so that was a part of her experience too. So you really need to detach your experience from her experience to enjoy. I don't even know if I can use the word enjoy by speaking about this book, but still, let's try to use it, to enjoy her writing and this book as a whole. And I have a lot of fighting thoughts in my head about this book, because this is written in form of a diary that's divided in winter, summer, and etc, etc. We have all the seasons and the months, and each and every month begins with kind of the overview of the month that she gives us, in the retrospective. So she tells us, in April this and this happened, and I reacted this and that way. And it's very useful because the subsequent part is that of her diary entries, and as a diary entry it is so strongly and deeply personal that without the context at the beginning we wouldn't be able to understand what happens in her mind and in her life just from those short or long entries, because often, of course, she just digs in her emotions and thoughts and just things that she remembers. And so it's very useful to have that kind of structure, a little bit more of an overstructure at the beginning and then the diary entries. But it is, for me personally, sometimes it was a little bit too much, because I felt as if I was intruding into someone's head, and it was too much for me. I didn't want to know so much of personal details about someone, because I was feeling like if I was intruding again, like if I was spying on someone and searching for the deepest meaning in their soul, unwillingly, because I'm just a reader, and for her willingly, because she's an author, she decided to edit it and put it out there for the world to read. So it's actually kind of an agreement between the reader and the writer in this case, but I still was feeling a little bit uncomfortable, as if it was a little bit too much for me. So that's the kind of diaristic experience that you have here. It's really truly a personal diary, and she's not only talking about the whole situation of the world, plus she's very isolated because she has a very bad internet connection, so she just has glimpses of kind of the real world out there during the whole experience. But what happens inside her is very meaningful and difficult and hard, because she's grieving. I'm not sure about this part. This could be just me creating an overstructure on what she's talking about in this book, but I think that she had some maybe miscarriages, or something happened that brought her to a place where she was grieving for the impossibility of having a child, pretty much. So what happens is that she's trying to kind of overcome this reality and to just make peace with that concept. And it's a process. It's deep. Sometimes it's really, really dirty, but not in the sense of dirty like something sexually dirty. No, it's dirty like you put your hands in the dirt and you just try to excavate the road to go forward. So it's really a process. This is not a light book, and plus it is full of references to other authors, some poetry, some songs. So it is full of references that are dear to the heart of the author. And so if you want an experience of something really intimate that really brings you in contact with someone, which means that you're not necessarily always agreeing with this person, you're not necessarily always understanding this person, but you really can see the raw beating heart and soul of a person, then this could be an experience that you may enjoy. So be careful. This is pretty much a huge beware sign, because I think that you need to approach it in the right way in order to enjoy it. And of course, trigger warning if you're struggling with motherhood, if you're grieving. These are all themes that are part of this book. The book ends kind of abruptly, because it ends exactly a year after what starts the story. it still has its own development, and I think that it was still well done as it was done, but I still wanted a little bit more. But I know that being it a diary, it's your life, you cannot decide when to stop it, what will happen next, what will happen next. Like, it's your life, you're living it currently in the moment. So I understand that it was a little bit hard for the author, and I actually have some parts that I really underlined, and that will be, I will just keep them for myself in order to reference in the future, because some things in this book are very, very meaningful and kind of impactful, and they can be referenced back even in the future, like even out of context. Like, for example, I just have here one single line underlined with no context, and it's, promise this to yourself: I am not the way I feel. And imagine how powerful it can be in certain moments of your life to just reread it to yourself. So I think that I will keep this book on the shelf, approaching it cautiously, kinda, but still I think that it's something that is worth keeping and reading. Again, it's not an easy read, not because it's using a complicated language, but because it's very emotional, and if you do not resonate with the author, this can really rub you the wrong way, I think. Plus, again, I highly underline this part, highlight this part. It speaks about the pandemic period of time, so caution there, and again, be aware that it's her experience and your experience could have been completely different, and it was valid and it was important. And sometimes, yes, it could be like when she's complaining about her style of life, it was, for some of us, I'm sure it was like the dream life during the pandemic. So of course you're kind of struggling while you're reading it, but still give it a chance. Try to separate yourself, your experience from her experience, and just understand what she's trying to convey. So it wasn't the easiest of reads. It took me quite a bit to go through it. I wasn't always willing to read it, like it wasn't a relaxing thing to do in the evening, for example, but I'm still very, very glad that I finished it. And let me know down below if you by any chance read this book, then let me know, or if you're interested in it for whatever reason, because I don't know if I actually did a good service to this book with this review. But I really hope that someone will decide to read it, because I think that it could be very impactful and meaningful for some people. And again, beware, trigger warning for like thoughts on maternity, motherhood, grief, child loss, fertility issues. So be very, very, very cautious with that. So yeah, this is it. Thank you so much for watching this strange kind of review, and I hope to see you very soon in my next video. Bye! Ciao!